Today we're going to look into the physiology of respiration. And to understand how breathing works, we first need to cover a basic concept called Boyle's law. So to explain Boyle's law, I have a jar here. And we can imagine that it's filled with different particles, and these particles will bounce against the wall of the jar and causing a force against the wall and a pressure inside the jar. And what Boyle's law states is that if this jar were to increase in volume, the pressure inside of it would drop, and if the jar were to instead decrease in volume, the pressure would increase, because as the animation shows here, that once the volume drops, the particles will bounce against the wall of the jar more frequently, and so therefore the pressure increases. Now let's take a look at how Boyle's law applies to the lungs. So when the volume of the lungs increases, the pressure inside of it drops, and the opposite happens when the volume shrinks, or when the volume decreases, then the pressure will increase. And in the body we have a few different muscles that causes the lung volume to change. When we're talking about resting in respiration, the main muscles are the diaphragm and also the intercostal muscles that sits in between the ribs. During inspiration, the intercostal muscles will pull each rib up towards the ceiling, basically, and this causes the entire rib cage to be pulled upwards, and this releases some of the weight that was previously against the lungs, and in combination with this, the diaphragm will pull at the bottom of the lungs and stretching them out. And now, according to Boyle's law, you can tell that the pressure is lower than it was before. And during expiration, basically the opposite happens. The rib cage or the intercostal muscles will relax, and causing the rib cage to be pushed down against the lungs, in combination with the diaphragm relaxing, and this causes the lungs to decrease in size because of the natural stretchiness of the lungs. The lungs is made up of elastin that will always naturally try and pull the lungs together. So once the respiratory muscles stops pulling the lungs out, it will naturally shrink, basically. Now let's take a look at the entire respiratory system and how the air moves throughout these changes in volume and pressure. So during inspiration, the lung volume increases, and the pressure inside of the lungs drops below the atmospheric pressure, and thereby the air will flow into the lungs. And then, as you could have guessed, during expiration, when the volume of the lungs decreases, the pressure inside the lungs becomes greater than that of the atmospheric pressure. and so the air will flow out of the lungs. That was it for this video. Thank you for listening, and consider subscribing if this video helped you, and leave a comment if there's something else that you're wondering about that you would like me to cover in another video.